Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Unruh, and I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about some fundamentals of reading financial statements. First of all, it's good to understand that when you're looking at columns of numbers in any of the four main financial statements, the income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flows, or statement of retained earnings, even though you will see dollar signs only at the top and at the bottom, if there is a grand total at the bottom, each of the numbers in between is also in dollars. Now that's pretty obvious on this income statement. We have fees earned, which are revenues, and we have expenses, and we would know that those are in dollars. But I'll show you an example where maybe you wouldn't know. This is the balance sheets for Microsoft, and I'm going to scroll down just a little bit to the stockholders' equity section. Let's say you're looking at this line talking about common stock. You might look over here at the 67,306 and wonder, is that shares of stock? Is it dollars? What am I reading? You're looking at dollars. And how do I know that? Well, because this is a balance sheet, one of the four main financial statements. And on the financial statements, the numbers in the columns at the right are always in a monetary unit. Dollars if you're talking about an American company. Again, the dollar sign will be at the top of the column or the top of the section, and at the bottom if there's a grand total. The reason we don't put dollars on every single number is just to reduce clutter, just to make it a little easier to read. A second thing to understand is the use of columns. Get back down there to the balance sheet. Sometimes it's very obvious what the columns are for. For these balance sheets for Microsoft, we have one column for 2013, another column for 2012. But sometimes we can also have columns. I'll look at the financial statements that are shown in your textbook, and these are for just one period of time. This is an income statement for the month of September 2013. And notice, even though we only have one period of time, we have two columns. And you might wonder why. Well, again, it's just to help the reader be able to easily understand what they're reading. In an income statement, we take revenues, which in the case of this doctor's office is fees earned from customers, of $5,500, and we're going to subtract from that the total expenses from the company to come down to net income. Well, total expenses are made up of all these individual expenses, and I know that because on the left we show the detail of what's being combined, in this case added together. We draw a single underline, which means we're going to perform some math, and then we have the answer, the subtotal in this case. Why did we move these over to the left? Just to make it easier to read, just so the reader can quickly go from this number to do the subtraction that needs to happen on this income statement. Let's scroll down and look at another example of using columns. I'm sorry this is so small, but I think you can get the idea. This is Family Healthcare's statement of cash flows, again just for 1 month. But notice we have three columns. In this case, we are adding 6,000 to 10,000 to come up with a subtotal of 16,000. And notice this 16,000 doesn't even have a separate line. It isn't even separately labeled. But that's okay. We know it's a subtotal of these two numbers. Then we're combining, in this case, subtracting 16,000 minus 1,500 to get to 14,500. How did I know we're subtracting? Only because over here it says deduct, which means subtract. Why did the person who made this financial statement put those columns over on the left? Well, because in the end, we need to combine these three numbers to get to our increase in cash. We need to take the change in operating or cash flows from operating activities, cash flows from investing activities, and cash flows from financing activities to come down to the increase in cash. And again, if these numbers were all over on the right, it would be difficult for the reader to see that we're combining those three amounts. Another thing to understand really quickly is the use of single and double underlines. Single underlines mean you can think of it kind of like an equal sign, or that you're going to be doing some math like I mentioned before. These are being combined to come to this answer. These two are being combined to come to this answer. A double underline means that's the end. That's the grand total, the end of the section, or the end of the page, depending on the situation. Notice we're combining these two numbers to come down to a total. There's our grand total. On the balance sheet, we're going to have two double underlines, assets and liabilities and stockholders' equity. Remember, those two equal each other. They're both going to have double underlines because that's the end of that section. Another concept is the use of parentheses. In accounting, we use a parentheses for one of three reasons. One reason is to show negative numbers. Another reason is to show a subtraction. And another is to show a cash outflow. And it just depends on the situation. Let's scroll down in Microsoft's balance sheet and see if we can find any negative or parentheses. Here we go. Here's one. We have a negative 856. What are we looking at over here? Retained earnings. And it tells us that if retained earnings is in parentheses, that means it's a deficit. I mean, in other words, a negative retained earnings. By the way, that's quite odd to have negative retained earnings. That means the company, over its life as of this date, which was the end of 2012, has paid out more dividends than it has earned in net income. Very unusual. But anyway, we do have negative retained earnings at the end of 2012. Let's see if we can find any other examples of parentheses. I know we'll see some in the cash flow statement, but I'll go to that in a minute. Let's see if we have any in the income statement. Oh yeah, we do. We have losses that are being shown in parentheses, and some other things that are difficult to explain. So anyway, think negative, think subtraction, or on the statement of cash flows, it's important to understand that we're talking about cash being paid out. Let's look at some good examples of that. Let's go down here to the financing section, which is a very common place to find cash flowing out. When we're paying back debt, we're paying the bank, paying off our loans at the bank, we're going to have, notice it says repayment of debt. We're going to have cash flowing out, so we have parentheses. We're going to have common stock repurchased. We go out and we buy back stock from our stockholders. We're paying them cash, so that's a cash outflow shown in parentheses. We're paying dividends to our stockholders, cash flowing out of the company shown in parentheses. So that's how accountants use parentheses: subtractions, negative numbers, or cash outflows. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about today is the use of different denominations. I'm going to flip back over to financial statements that are in your textbook. For family health care, we have an income statement, and notice up in the title of the financial statement, there's no mention here of anything that says like in thousands or in millions. And what that means is the numbers that you're looking at are the actual numbers. The fees earned by Family Health Care in the month of September 2013 were $5,500. And there's nothing you need to do with that number. But sometimes, I'll flip back over to Microsoft, sometimes you will have financial statements, I'll go up to the balance sheet, that are in millions or in thousands. And what that means is that in preparing the financial statements, the numbers were so large that the company decided to make it easier to read again, to divide every number by $1 million in this case, or sometimes by $1,000 if it's said in thousands. So what that means for us is that when we're reading these statements, we need to, if we want to know the actual number, we need to multiply all these numbers by that amount, in this case, $1 million. So, for example, Microsoft did not have cash at the end of 2012, did not have cash of $6,938. It had, I need to put 6 zeros behind that. That's how you quickly multiply by $1 million. Microsoft had $6,938 million of cash and cash equivalents. It didn't have $121,271 in total assets. I have to put 6 zeros behind that to get the actual number. It had $121,271 million in total assets. So again, all I'm doing is multiplying by $1 million. If this said in thousands, I would be putting 3 zeros behind instead of 6. If you have any questions about this or anything else, be sure to get a hold of me. I'd be happy to hear from you and answer your questions for you.